cream, Camay.
No wonder women everywhere are changing to new Camay.
There's cold cream now in Camay. There's cold cream now in Camay.
There's cold cream now in Camay.
New elegance and new luxury. Try a cake and you will see there's cold cream now in Camay.
So something I've noticed over and over again when I'm flipping through vintage magazines is cold cream ads. You'll be paging through fashion ads, maybe a few household ads, and some beauty content. And there it is again, cold cream. Same product, same calm tone. Sometimes it's the same general message, just illustrated slightly differently. And this really tickles my brain because in 2 of my previous career lives, I was an esthetician and I also worked in marketing and advertising. So these cold cream ads kind of sit right at that intersection of skincare and persuasion, which I find endlessly interesting. Now, I want to say this right up front. I don't personally love cold cream and I don't use it myself. I never really have, especially modern versions of it. But despite that, I am fascinated by it, especially by how it was marketed, why it stuck around for so long, and why so many women trusted it for decades. So today I want to go down a little vintage beauty rabbit hole and talk about cold cream, what it actually was, how it fit into women's lives, why the marketing around it was so effective, and why it became such a constant presence in beauty culture. This isn't a you should use this or you shouldn't use that kind of video. It's more of a how did this become the product kind of conversation. Cold cream itself isn't a modern invention at all. Versions of cold cream date back to ancient Greece, where physicians described mixtures of water, oils, and waxes to protect the skin. The cooling sensation caused by water evaporating from the skin gave it its name. By the late 1800s and early 1900s, cold cream had settled into a very specific role. It wasn't treated like makeup and it wasn't treated like medicine. It lived somewhere in the middle. Part grooming habit, part skincare, part everyday maintenance. And that positioning made it feel appropriate, respectable, like something you were supposed to do if you were taking reasonable care of yourself. That sense of normalcy really becomes important once advertising enters the picture. One of the biggest reasons that I would hear people say that, when they don't like cold cream today is I think because they're expecting it to behave like modern skincare. Cold cream wasn't meant to foam. It was not meant to deeply cleanse the skin or to treat acne, exfoliate, or fix anything. Its job was pretty simple. Cold cream dissolved makeup. It softened dirt and grime. It reduced irritation, and it left a protective layer behind. And that last part, the part that a lot of people hate now, that kind of slightly waxy coated feeling, that was intentional. Skin wasn't meant to feel squeaky clean. It was meant to feel protected. When we look back at cold cream now, it helps to step into the rhythm of daily life at that time. Cold cream was often used in the evening, sometimes massaged in and wiped off with a cloth or facial tissue, aka Kleenex, sometimes left on longer depending on the person. It wasn't rushed. It didn't promise instant results. It was something you worked into your routine and didn't have to think too hard about it. Women were dealing with much heavier makeup, city grime, coal smoke, cold air, and very basic yet harsh soaps. In that environment, cold cream made the skin feel calmer and much more comfortable. And when a product does that reliably, it tends to become background noise in the best possible way.
Busy you, in and out of doors every day. Think how much dust and dirt settle on your skin. And makeup clings to your skin too and clogs pores. That's why your face needs a thorough cleansing each day. And that's why cleansing tests were made by an independent testing laboratory. This same kind of dirt was made just radioactive enough to register on a Geiger counter. Leading cleansing creams, complexion soaps, and Dorothy Gray Salon Cold Cream were used to remove this dirt. The Geiger counter proved that Dorothy Gray Salon Cold Cream cleanses up to 2.5 times more thoroughly than any soap or other cleansing cream tested. When you cleanse with Dorothy Gray Salon Cold Cream, you know you remove dirt. And more important, you remove every trace of makeup which can clog your pores. That's why Salon Cold Cream is especially recommended for a young complexion. A clean skin is a healthy skin, and your skin will look smoother and clearer when you use Dorothy Gray Salon Cold Cream. It's so quick and easy, too. Takes no more time than improper cleansing.
Now, cold cream wasn't the only cream that women were using. You'll often see vanishing cream mentioned alongside it in magazines and beauty advice columns. Vanishing cream was usually a much lighter cream used during the day, especially under your makeup, because it absorbed quickly and it didn't leave much residue. So cold cream and vanishing cream weren't competing with each other. They were part of the same rhythm. One fit into nighttime cleansing routines, the other fit into getting ready to leave the house. Think of it as a primer. That division of roles helps explain why cold cream didn't need to do everything. It had a job and it stayed in its lane. And something I sometimes think gets lost in modern conversation about vintage beauty and advertising is that women were just fooled. They weren't. Cold cream stuck around because it worked well enough for enough people. Cold cream didn't ask much of the person using it. You didn't really need to understand the ingredients or have the need to layer products. It didn't sting, it didn't surprise your skin or suddenly cause chaos. Once you found something that your skin tolerated, you didn't really have a reason to go experimenting. You just kept using it. And I think it's really important to say this plainly. Women weren't just passively absorbing advertising messages. They were making practical decisions based on what worked for their skin and their lives. Advertising reinforced those decisions, but it didn't replace the experience. When you look closely at cold cream advertising, especially from brands like Pond's, the tone is strikingly calm. There's very little urgency. The language is soft. The visuals are gentle. The promises are modest. What's being sold isn't excitement, it's reassurance. The ads feel like they're saying this is already a part of your life, even when they're introducing the product for the first time. And that's a powerful thing to suggest. And what's especially interesting is how little the messaging changes over time. Decade after decade, the tone stays pretty steady. That kind of consistency builds trust in a very quiet way. From a modern marketing perspective, this is extremely sophisticated. It's long-term brand building. It's emotional familiarity. It's patience. And honestly, if this was a modern brand, we'd probably be praising it for having such a strong brand identity. Another thing that stands out in these ads is how beauty is framed as something very ordinary. Cold cream advertising doesn't dramatize beauty. It doesn't present skincare as a dramatic transformation. It treats grooming as part of daily life, something you do because it's normal, not because it's exciting. And there's an assumption built into these ads that beauty lives in routine, in repetition. And if you think about it, that mindset really hasn't gone away. It's just louder now. The fonts are different, the platforms are different, but the emotional appeal is still very familiar. Cold cream just did it quietly. And speaking of advertising, I'm going to take a very brief break to hear from this week's sponsor, me.
Are you someone who enjoys thoughtful discussions about vintage fashion and beauty history? Do you find yourself wondering why trends happen, not just what they were? Then you may be interested in a little gathering known as the New Look Society. Once a month, members meet virtually to choose a topic and enjoy a lively discussion on vintage style, beauty, history, and all the fascinating details in between. Topics may include creating a signature style, how to romanticize everyday life, vintage hairstyling and troubleshooting, And for those unable to attend in real time, recordings are always available because we understand that modern life is, well, modern. Join a group of like-minded vintage enthusiasts who enjoy asking questions, sharing ideas, and thoroughly geeking out together. Available now via Patreon. And now, back to our regularly scheduled rabbit hole.
This is usually where people start thinking about ingredients and texture. Now, over time, cold cream formulas changed. The formulas that your mother or your grandmother used back in the day are not the same as they are now. As production scaled up and distribution expanded, ingredients shifted towards things that were easier and cheaper to manufacture consistently and keep stable on shelves. Modern cold creams tend to lean more heavily on petroleum-based ingredients. That makes them cheap, stable, and shelf-friendly, but also heavier and blunter. So when I hear someone say, I tried cold cream and I hated it, and feel confused by its reputation, that reaction kind of makes sense to me. They're encountering a product that carries the name and the history, but not quite the same feel. And they're definitely not using it in the same world. Now, I know that there are die-hard cold cream fans out there, and that is fantastic. I'm so glad that you were able to find a product that worked well for your skin. I just think it's important to show the differences that, these vintage beauty products are really only vintage in name and reputation, not necessarily ingredients. What I find really interesting in skincare is that we haven't actually abandoned the ideas behind cold cream. We've just rebranded them. We now have cleansing balms and oil cleansing and a focus on protecting the skin barrier. The idea that skin doesn't need to feel stripped to feel clean. These aren't new concepts, they're refinements supported by better science and a better understanding of skin biology. We know so much more about acne, inflammation, and the skin barrier, so we don't need cold cream to do all that heavy lifting anymore. But the core idea that gentler isn't worse and that skin doesn't need to be constantly corrected has quietly made a comeback. So do I think cold cream was a miracle product? No. But I don't think it was nonsense either, or mass delusion, or even women being tricked by advertising. It worked because it fit real lives. And it lasted because the marketing respected routine. And it somewhat faded because culture, science, and expectations changed. And once you start looking at beauty history through that lens, you realize that there's a lot of beauty products, past and present, that make a lot more sense when you stopped judging them by modern expectations. Cold cream is just a very clear example of how culture, science, and marketing all move together. So that's today's rabbit hole. If you enjoy this kind of slower observational look at vintage beauty, the products, the habits, the psychology behind them, there are plenty more places that we could go with this. Vintage beauty is full of things like this that start to make a lot more sense once you slow down and really look at the context around them. And if you like this exact kind of conversation, I encourage you to check out my Patreon community at the New Look level. That's where we get to ask questions, trade observations, and really geek out together in a more relaxed, back and forth way. Cold cream just happens to be a really good place to start. If you have thoughts or memories of cold cream, I would love to hear them. And as always, thank you so much for being here. I will see you next time.